Well, new details tonight after an investigation into a former Duluth East hockey coach. We're now learning he will not face any charges. Former boys coach Mike Randolph left the program back in June of 2021. About a month after an external investigation into his behavior was finished, for the first time, Northern News Now obtained a copy of that investigation's findings, shared with us by one of the 50 people who were interviewed during it. The findings showed Randolph threatened players and parents with legal action and violated school district harassment policies. However, the findings showed claims of fraud were unfounded. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension also investigated the fraud allegations at the request of Duluth Police. Their findings were reviewed by the St. Louis County Attorney's Office, which decided not to file any charges. In a statement to Northern News Now today, Duluth School District Superintendent John Magus said that they take reports from students and staff very seriously and are committed to investigating their concerns. Randolph was previously coaching at St. Thomas Academy up until this spring, when that school decided to go a different direction. He's now coaching the Northern Lakes High School boys hockey team. We have not been able to reach Randolph for a comment.